"Rosie, honey, come away from him." Claire's voice was steady. Her hands were not. Bear stood in the center of the living room, 200 pounds of golden brown muscle, a head the size of a basketball, wrinkled face, deep-set eyes, a jaw that could crush bone, shoulders like a linebacker. Claire stopped that thought before it finished. Rosie. But Rosie wasn't listening. She never listened anymore. She stood 3 feet from Bear, her tiny hands at her sides, staring up at him with those wide, silent eyes. Bear stared back. Neither of them moved. "Please," Claire whispered. "Please come here." Rosie took 1 step forward. Claire's heart stopped. Bear lowered his massive head slowly, so slowly, until his wrinkled face was level with Rosie's. And Rosie reached out both arms and hugged him. Claire couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She stood there with her hand pressed to her mouth, watching her daughter hold this enormous animal. And Bear didn't move, didn't flinch, just held perfectly still like he understood exactly what this moment was. Because that was the first time in 6 months her daughter had reached for anything. 6 months earlier, Claire's life had been different. Tom had been alive. Rosie had been loud, gloriously, endlessly, exhaustingly loud. She sang in the car. She talked to her stuffed animals. She asked why approximately 400 times a day. "Why is the sky blue, Daddy? Why do dogs have tails, Mommy? Why? Why?" Tom would catch Claire's eye over Rosie's head and smile, that smile that meant, "Isn't she something?" She was something. She was everything. Then came the Tuesday in October. A wet road, a red light, a truck that didn't stop. Tom died on impact. The doctor said Rosie was unharmed. No broken bones, no head injury, no physical trauma. But Rosie never spoke again. Not that night in the hospital, not the next morning, not at the funeral where she sat on Claire's lap and stared at the coffin with those enormous silent eyes. Not in the 6 months that followed. The pediatrician called it selective mutism, post-traumatic, possibly temporary, possibly not. Claire called it the worst sound she had ever heard. Silence where her daughter used to be. Bear had been Tom's dog. Claire had forgotten about him in those first terrible weeks. Tom's brother had taken him the night of the accident. Then 3 months later he'd called. "Claire, I'm sorry. My landlord won't allow him. I've tried everything." She almost said no. A 200-pound dog in her house with a traumatized 4-year-old. It was too much. It was all too much. But she thought of Tom. How he'd picked Bear out as a puppy. How he'd trained him himself. How he talked about Bear to Rosie every single night at bedtime, even before she was old enough to understand. "Bear is going to be your best friend," Tom used to say. "Just you wait." Every night, Tom would sit on the edge of Rosie's bed and tell her about Bear. Not fairy tales, not made-up stories, real ones. Bear stealing Tom's sandwich off the counter and looking completely innocent. Rosie would giggle with her whole body, that giggle that started in her belly and came out like music. "Will Bear sleep on my feet too, Daddy?" "Probably your whole body," Tom would say. "He doesn't understand how big he is." Rosie would laugh again. "Silly Bear." "Silly Bear," Tom would agree. Then he'd kiss her forehead and turn off the light. Those were the last words Rosie ever said to her father. "Silly Bear." Claire closed her eyes. "Bring him tomorrow," she said. Bear arrived on a Thursday morning. He walked through the front door and stopped. His massive head moved slowly around the room, taking everything in. Then he saw Rosie standing in the hallway in her pink pajamas, watching him. Bear went completely still. His deep-set eyes locked on the little girl. Something passed across his face that Claire couldn't name. Then he walked to Rosie slowly, deliberately, and sat down directly in front of her. Just sat there looking at her. Rosie looked back. Neither of them made a sound. Claire stood in the doorway watching and felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months. She didn't know what it was. She just knew it wasn't nothing. The first week, Bear followed Rosie everywhere. Not aggressively, not intrusively, just always there, 3 feet behind her. When she sat on the floor, he sat close enough for her to feel his warmth. Rosie never spoke to him, but she stopped flinching when he moved. She started saving pieces of her toast, dropping them on the floor beside his bowl. Claire watched all of this from doorways and hallways, out of the corner of her eye. She didn't want to disturb whatever was happening. She didn't understand it, but she recognized it, the way you recognize something important before you have words for it. 3 weeks after Bear arrived, Dr. Sarah Mills sat across from Claire in her office and folded her hands. "I want to be honest with you," she said. Claire already knew what was coming. She'd learned to recognize that tone. Rosie's case is complex. The trauma she experienced was severe. The mutism is deeply rooted. Dr. Mills paused. "Progress is possible, but it will be slow," and it requires Rosie to find something, or someone, she feels completely safe with. Claire drove home in silence, sat in the driveway for 10 minutes. When she walked inside, Bear was lying in the hallway outside Rosie's room. His enormous body stretched across the entire width of the corridor. Rosie was on the floor beside him, her small hand resting on his back, her eyes closed. Not sleeping, just resting. The way you rest when you feel safe. Claire stood there for a long time. Then she went to the kitchen and cried. That night, Claire got up at 2 a.m. Bear was outside Rosie's door. She sat beside him on the floor. She didn't know why. Take care of her, she whispered. Bear's tail moved once, slow and steady like a promise. The following night was different. She lay in the dark, listening to the house. Tom used to say he could hear Rosie breathing from their room. Now the house was so quiet Claire could hear everything. The refrigerator hum, the wind outside, Bear shifting his weight in the hallway. Then something else. A sound so small she almost missed it. A voice. Rosie's voice. Claire sat up. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. She got out of bed, walked to the door, opened it slowly. The hallway was dark except for the night light at the end of the corridor. Bear was sitting outside Rosie's room. And Rosie was sitting between his front legs, her back against his massive chest, her head tilted up toward his wrinkled face, talking. 6 months of silence and her daughter was talking. Claire pressed herself against the wall. She didn't want to move. Didn't want to make a sound. Didn't want to break whatever this was. She listened. Rosie's voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence of that hallway, it was the loudest thing Claire had ever heard. I saw the truck, Bear. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Daddy didn't see it, but I saw it. Claire couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then Rosie's hand found Bear's collar. Her fingers moved along it slowly and stopped. Bear, her voice changed. This is Daddy's. Silence. The hallway was completely still. Even the house seemed to stop breathing. Then Rosie pressed her cheek against the collar. He's still here, she whispered. Isn't he, Bear? Bear lowered his massive head, rested it gently on top of Rosie's and stayed there. The next morning, Rosie sat down at breakfast and looked at Claire. Really looked at her, for the first time in 6 months. Mommy, she said, small, rusty, like something that hadn't been used in a long time. Claire froze. Daddy told Bear to find me. Claire looked at her daughter. Really? Rosie nodded, completely certain, the way only children can be certain about things adults have stopped believing. Claire took her daughter's hand across the table and held it. Bear's tail thumped once against the floor, slow and steady like a heartbeat. Did this story touch your heart? Then think of the animal that stayed when everyone else left. The one that knew something was wrong before you did. The one that never stopped trying to tell you. Write their name below. Let the world know their name. They deserve it. If this story moved you, like this video and subscribe. It means everything to us. Thank you for being here with us today. See you in the next video. Have a beautiful day.